It was past midnight when I heard a knock on my door. At first, I thought I imagined it. Who would come at this hour? The soft rhythm of the knock continued, steady, deliberate. I hesitated before getting up. My apartment wasn't in the best part of town, and late-night visitors usually meant trouble. When I opened the door, I saw Mr. Harrington standing there, my wealthy neighbor from the penthouse suite. His tailored suit was slightly unbuttoned, his hair slightly tousled, as if he had been deep in thought for hours before deciding to come here. He never acknowledged me before, never even gave me a second glance in the elevator. So why now? And why at this ungodly hour? "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice calm but urgent. His gaze held something unreadable, a mix of determination and hesitation. I should have closed the door. I should have told him to leave. But curiosity held me there. This was a man who lived in a world far above mine, literally and figuratively. He was the type who hosted extravagant rooftop parties while I struggled to pay rent. "What is this about?" I asked, my voice firmer than I felt. His lips pressed into a thin line before he finally said, "I have a proposition for you." A strange chill ran down my spine. Whatever this was, I knew one thing. My life would never be the same after this conversation. I folded my arms, trying to mask my unease. A proposition? The word felt heavy, loaded with meanings I couldn't yet decipher. Mr. Harrington glanced down the dimly lit hallway before stepping inside uninvited. His cologne lingered in the air, rich, expensive, and completely out of place in my tiny apartment. He looked around as if seeing my space for the first time, his gaze pausing on the stack of unpaid bills on my kitchen counter. My stomach tightened. "I know this is unconventional," he said, turning back to me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something I didn't expect: vulnerability. I scoffed, shifting my weight. "Unconventional? A billionaire showing up at my door in the middle of the night with some kind of proposition? Yeah, I'd say that's an understatement." He exhaled sharply, as if he had expected my resistance. "Listen, I don't have time to explain everything right now, but I need someone I can trust. And for some reason, I think that's you." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Trust? You don't even know me." "That's exactly why," he said, his voice lowering. "Everyone in my world wants something from me. They all have their own agendas. But you don't belong to my world. That makes you the only person I can trust." I stared at him, my pulse quickening. Whatever this was, it wasn't small. "And what exactly do you need me to do?" His jaw tightened. "I need you to pretend to be my fiancée." The words hit like a slap. I blinked, certain I had misheard him. "What?" He took a step closer, his gaze steady. "For 1 month, no strings attached, just a public arrangement. In return, I'll take care of all your financial problems." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. My rent, my debt, my entire life. I had spent years drowning, clawing for stability. And now in one sentence, he was offering me an escape. But why me? I searched his face for an answer, but all I saw was a man who wasn't used to asking for favors. "This is insane," I whispered. "I know." His voice was softer now. "But you need money, and I need someone I can trust. Think about it." He slipped a sleek black card onto my counter and turned toward the door. Before stepping out, he paused. "If you say yes, meet me at the Le Grand Hotel tomorrow at noon." Then without another word, he was gone. I stood there staring at the card, my pulse thundering in my ears. What had just happened? I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying Mr. Harrington's words, his calm yet urgent tone, the unreadable expression in his eyes. "I need someone I can trust." That didn't make sense. Why would a billionaire, a man who could have anyone at his beck and call, choose me, a broke, ordinary woman who lived 2 floors below him? I spent the morning pacing my apartment, staring at the sleek black card he had left on my counter. Le Grand Hotel. Noon. Logic told me to ignore it. This was dangerous, reckless. No one made an offer like that without hidden strings. But then I looked at my pile of overdue bills. My landlord had already given me a final warning. One more missed payment and I was out. By 11:30, I found myself standing outside the Le Grand Hotel, staring up at its gleaming glass entrance. My hands were clammy, my heart racing. Maybe he wouldn't even be here. Maybe this was some kind of twisted joke. I stepped inside, the scent of fresh roses and expensive leather wrapping around me. Everything about this place screamed money. Elegance dripping from the chandeliers, polished floors reflecting my hesitant steps. A woman in a crisp uniform approached me with a warm but rehearsed smile. "Miss, you're expected. Right this way." I swallowed hard as she led me through a series of sleek corridors before stopping in front of a private lounge. She opened the door, and there he was, Mr. Harrington, seated on a velvet chair, his suit crisp, his expression unreadable. He gestured to the seat across from him. "I was starting to think you wouldn't show." I sat down slowly, still unsure if this was the biggest mistake of my life. "I almost didn't." A flicker of amusement passed through his eyes. "But you're here." I folded my arms, leaning back. "I want to know the truth. Why me?" His fingers tapped against the table, his expression unreadable. "Because I need someone with no ties to my world, someone no one would suspect." "Suspect?" My chest tightened. "So, this isn't just about a fake engagement, is it?" A long pause. Then finally he exhaled. "Number, it's not." A chill ran down my spine. "Then what is it about?" He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I need you to help me uncover a betrayal within my own family." The air between us turned electric, thick with something I couldn't name. I should have walked away right then, but something in his eyes held me there. And for some reason, I wanted to know more. I stared at him, my breath shallow. A betrayal? This wasn't just about a fake engagement. This was something much, much deeper. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to get out before I got tangled in something I couldn't escape. But another part of me, the part that had spent years feeling invisible, struggling to survive while people like him lived in luxury, felt an undeniable pull. "Who betrayed you?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. His jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away, as if saying it out loud would make it real. Then after a long pause, he exhaled. "My brother." I blinked. Of all the things I expected him to say, that wasn't one of them. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tightening around the glass of whiskey in front of him. "Our family's wealth comes with a lot of power, and with power comes enemies, some from the outside, some from within." I stayed silent, waiting. "My father built an empire," he continued. "He was ruthless, but he was fair. When he passed, everything was left to me. That didn't sit well with James." His lips pressed into a thin line. "He believes he was robbed of what should have been his. And now, I have reason to believe he's planning something. Something big. I just don't know what." I frowned. "And what does that have to do with me?" His eyes met mine, dark and unwavering. "Because James would never suspect you." A cold realization settled in my stomach. "You want me to spy on him?" "I want you to be my fiancée," he corrected smoothly. "To the public, we'll be engaged. That gives you access to events, conversations, people who wouldn't think twice before speaking in front of you. No one will see you as a threat." I let out a sharp laugh. "So you don't just need a fiancé, you need a pawn." His expression didn't change. "I need an ally." I shook my head, exhaling. "And what happens if I say no?" His gaze darkened slightly. "Then I walk away and you go back to your life, struggling, fighting for every dollar, watching doors close in your face while people like me walk through them effortlessly." I clenched my fists. He wasn't wrong, and we both knew it. He leaned forward, his voice quieter now. "But if you say yes, you'll never have to worry about money again. I'll pay off your debts, set you up for life. 1 month, and then you walk away, free." My heart pounded in my chest. This was dangerous, I knew that, but it was also the kind of opportunity that only came once. I swallowed hard. "And if I get caught?" His lips curved slightly, but there was no humor in it. "Then we both go down." A heavy silence settled between us. I had a choice to make, and I only had seconds to decide. I felt the weight of his offer pressing down on me. 1 month, one life-changing decision, one deal that could either save me or destroy me. I should have walked away. I should have told him I wasn't the kind of person who played these games. But something inside me, some reckless, desperate part, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was my way out. I met his gaze, my throat dry. If I do this, I want everything in writing. I want proof that you'll follow through. His expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Approval. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a folded document. Already prepared. I hesitated before taking it. The paper was thick, expensive. The kind of contract only someone like him could afford to have drawn up overnight. My eyes skimmed over the terms. 1 month. A full financial reset. Enough money to start over. I swallowed hard. And all I have to do is play the role of your fiancé? His lips curved, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. And help me find out what my brother is planning? I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly as I reached for the pen he offered. The moment my name hit the paper, something inside me shifted. I had just agreed to a deal with a man I barely knew, and deep down, I had a feeling I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. I kept my expression neutral, but my pulse pounded in my ears. James Harrington wasn't like his brother. His presence felt dangerous. There was something sharp about the way he looked at me, something that told me he wasn't fooled, not even for a second. He took another slow step forward, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. I have to say, my brother's taste has changed. He usually goes for women with a little more refinement. His smirk deepened, as if daring me to react. I didn't flinch. If I was going to survive this, I had to be just as calculated as they were. I tilted my head, offering a small, practiced smile. Or maybe he finally got tired of the same boring, predictable women. His smirk faltered for half a second before returning, but I caught the flicker of amusement in his eyes. Touché. Just then, footsteps echoed from the hallway, and Mr. Harrington appeared. His gaze flicked between me and his brother, his expression darkening. I see you've met James. James turned to him, his smirk never fading. Oh, we were just getting acquainted. She's quite the actress, isn't she? I felt Mr. Harrington stiffen beside me. I didn't bring her here to entertain you, James. His tone was calm, but there was an unspoken warning beneath his words. James laughed under his breath, stepping back. Relax, brother. I'm just, curious. His gaze settled on me once more. Welcome to the family, sweetheart. I have a feeling you're going to make things very interesting. With that, he walked away, leaving behind an air of quiet menace. I exhaled, barely realizing I had been holding my breath. He doesn't believe this, does he? Mr. Harrington's jaw clenched. James doesn't believe anything unless it benefits him. He turned to me fully now, his expression unreadable. But that doesn't mean he won't test you. He'll look for cracks in the story, ways to expose you. You need to be ready. I swallowed. And if he finds out the truth? His gaze darkened. Then you and I are both screwed. A heavy silence settled between us. I had stepped into a world where trust didn't exist, where betrayal was a currency, and where one wrong move could destroy everything. And now I wasn't just playing the role of a billionaire's fiancé. I was walking a razor-thin line between survival and disaster. The rest of the day passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Mr. Harrington, Nathan as I was now supposed to call him, had a team of stylists waiting for me the moment James disappeared. A woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue circled me like a lioness assessing prey. We have a lot of work to do, she muttered before snapping her fingers. Suddenly I was being measured, my hair was being examined, and someone was already discussing designer brands I'd never even heard of. Nathan stood by the window, phone in hand, as if none of this was unusual. His voice was low, clipped, discussing something about stock portfolios and international deals while I was transformed into a woman who could pass as his fiancée. I sat stiffly as the stylist curled my hair. Is this really necessary? I muttered. The woman scoffed. You're about to step into the most exclusive social circles in the country. People will judge you before you even open your mouth. You need to look the part. I bit my tongue, swallowing my irritation. She wasn't wrong, but it stung, knowing that without all of this, I would never be enough for their world. By the time they were finished, I barely recognized myself. My hair fell in soft, effortless waves, my skin glowed under the subtle makeup, and the emerald green dress they had picked out hugged my body in ways that made me feel both powerful and vulnerable. Nathan finally glanced up from his phone. His gaze flicked over me, assessing, calculating. For a moment, I thought I saw something else, something softer, but it was gone before I could be sure. "This will work," he said simply. I rolled my eyes. "Glad I have your approval." A ghost of a smirk touched his lips. "You're going to need thicker skin than that." Before I could reply, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. "It's James. He's inviting us to a family dinner tonight." I tensed. "And by inviting, you mean?" "He wants to test you." Nathan slipped his phone into his pocket. "He won't make it easy." A pit formed in my stomach. "And what if I fail?" Nathan stepped closer, his gaze locking onto mine. "Then this entire deal falls apart." The Harrington estate looked even more intimidating at night. The grand dining hall, with its towering chandeliers and cold marble floors, felt less like a home and more like a battleground. James was already seated at the head of the long dining table when we arrived, a glass of dark red wine swirling in his hand. His smirk widened when he saw me. "Ah, the woman of the hour." I forced a polite smile, slipping my hand into Nathan's. His grip was firm, steady but cold. I didn't know if he was acting or if this was just how he always was. James leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes studying me. "Tell me, sweetheart, how did my brother manage to sweep you off your feet? Was it the money? The power?" I matched his smirk with one of my own. "It was his charm, actually." James chuckled, slow and deliberate. "Interesting. My brother isn't known for his charm." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. A waiter poured me a glass of wine, and James lifted his own in a mock toast. "To the happy couple. May their love be as real as they claim." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. Dinner was a careful game of words and glances. Every question James asked felt like a test, a trap waiting to be sprung. He asked about how we met, about Nathan's habits, about our future plans. I had memorized everything Nathan told me, but James watched me like a predator, waiting for me to slip. And then, just as I thought I had survived the worst of it, James set down his glass and leaned forward. "So tell me," he said, voice smooth as silk, "did my brother tell you what really happened to our father?" I froze. Nathan's entire body went rigid beside me. James tilted his head, a wicked glint in his eyes. "No? He didn't mention how our dear father died under mysterious circumstances? How Nathan was the last person to see him alive?" My pulse pounded. This wasn't just a test anymore. This was something else, something dark. I turned to Nathan, but his expression had turned to stone. James smirked. "Oh dear, it looks like you're just as in the dark as the rest of us." He sat back amused. "Tell me, sweetheart, are you sure you want to be engaged to a murderer?" Silence crashed over the room. My heart pounded as I looked at Nathan, searching for any hint of denial. But he said nothing. James let out a soft chuckle. "That's what I thought." I had walked into this deal thinking it was about money, about power. But now I realized I was engaged to a man with blood on his hands. My hands trembled under the table, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the moment James had been waiting for. He wanted me to break, to doubt, to run. I swallowed hard, keeping my face unreadable. "That's a serious accusation," I said, my voice steady. James smirked, pleased that I hadn't crumbled. "Oh, it's not an accusation, sweetheart. It's the truth." I turned to Nathan, my heart pounding. "Tell me he's lying." Nathan finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then in the quietest voice he said, "I didn't kill him." I wanted to believe him, but the hesitation in his voice was enough for the seed of doubt to take root. James exhaled dramatically, shaking his head. "You see, that's the problem with my dear brother. He never really lies. He just doesn't tell the whole truth." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "Enough, James." James ignored him, his gaze locked onto mine, his voice dropping lower. Our father didn't just die, love. He was pushed down the grand staircase, right here, in this very house. His smile was slow, cruel. And guess who inherited everything after that? I felt the blood drain from my face. Nathan's voice was razor sharp. I didn't push him. James shrugged. Maybe not. But you were the last person with him, weren't you? He looked at me again. You see the problem now, don't you? You're in bed with a man who might have murdered his own father. Silence hung between us like a blade. Nathan exhaled, slow and controlled. You've had your fun, James, but we're done here. James chuckled. Oh no, brother. We're just getting started. Then before I could react, he pulled something from his pocket and slid it across the table. A flash drive. Nathan's entire body went still. James leaned in, smiling like a man who had already won. That, dear fiancé, is security footage from the night our father died. I felt my breath hitch. Nathan didn't move, didn't blink. James tilted his head. You have two choices. You can take that drive and see the truth for yourself, or you can walk away and live in blissful ignorance. His words sent a shiver down my spine. I turned to Nathan, but he was already standing. We're leaving. James chuckled darkly. Scared she'll see something you don't want her to? Nathan grabbed my wrist, his touch firm, but I yanked my arm free. My voice was barely above a whisper. Nathan, what's on that drive? His jaw tightened. He didn't answer.